In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst.
He is and ever shall be.
Y'all are welcome to come on up front if you want. I don't bite. Maybe. Today we celebrate a rather elevated feast for the first week of Lent. We began the fast, of course, with having services every night and a certain type of strictness and tiredness, but the first Sunday is actually somewhat of a joyous feast, the celebration of the triumph of orthodoxy. I'll tell you more about that feast in a minute, but first of all, I'd like to take you on a little mental image journey, whatever those are called. Imagine there was a crown, a beautiful ancient crown, and this crown was crafted in relationship to God. In other words, it was a divinely revealed crown, a crown that was meant for a king, and of course made of solid gold with various jewels, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and everything done in a particular way. And of course, passed down and inherited from generation to generation to be to signify the royalty, to signify the dignity, and ultimately bestowing in so many ways upon the king the royal beauty of their kingship. Now, time goes by, of course, and people forget things, and maybe some of us might approach that crown. And seeing the crown, some of us have maybe different aesthetical senses. Maybe we don't like certain colors, so we think, wouldn't it be nice if we could just pop off some of those emeralds? Maybe just keep one. Some come along and they don't like rubies, and so they do that. Others, it's a little gaudy to begin with, all that stuff on it, and they need it simplified to the point maybe where it's just shiny gold. Why all this busyness and this filigree? Well, clearly, as this happens, the crown begins to lose its glory. It begins to not be what it was, and in the end, depending on how many people pick at it, it becomes very distorted and destroyed, and of course, that next generation doesn't inherit the original royal dignity that was revealed by God. Now, that crown is an analogy that's sometimes used to speak about the Orthodox tradition. The Orthodox tradition which we believe Jesus Christ passed to his apostles, and that has been passed down to us through every generation, which has many different facets to it. For instance, one of the prime jewels of this crown would be the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures that we've had that were passed from the apostles. There are other things, such as the ecumenical councils, where doctrine and dogma was defined, practice. We have other things like architecture or the hymnology that is sung in church as one of the many facets or the filigree that make up this royal crown that the king wears. And we believe these things weren't just made by men, but were revealed by God. And then, of course, there is the jewel that is iconography. And today's feast day is a feast day about the restoration of icons in the 9th century after 100 years of persecution. After 100 years where someone said, you know what? I don't like, or I don't think it's proper to have something the church has always had, so I think it's time that we remove it. And of course, during that 100 years, many people on the other side said, no, you're lessening the faith, you're changing it. This is what we've always believed. This is what we've inherited. And many died on behalf of those who were in favor of keeping icons or were protecting the doctrine of the church, until finally the time when God's order was regained and the iconoclasts were defeated. And in honor of this, they had a great procession with icons back to the Constantinopolitan Cathedral, the Hagia Sophia, as the restoration of icons. Now, this feast starts there with the triumph of orthodoxy, but over time it begins to develop even further because it becomes to symbolize every dogmatic decree. You know, it was at that last ecumenical council that icons were restored, but it begins to remember all of the various times when somebody wanted to change something fundamental about the faith. And that is, with the crown analogy, the jewels are not ornaments. They are fundamental to it. They are part of its very fabric. And this is the way we view iconography with the dogmatic decree, with the very clear clarification that, of course, we do not worship wooden paints. We only show honor, we venerate it, and that our veneration that is offered before the icon isn't worshiping just that wooden paint, but that veneration goes to the prototype. Ultimately, our iconography is a confession of faith because it confesses that the Lord became material and that matter matters. That matter can be sanctified and used in our salvation. And of course, as a sacramental faith, this is very fundamental to what we believe. Now, as we move forward in the Orthodox faith, we have been given a great inheritance to, first of all, to adopt ourselves, to allow it to mold us, to allow it to change us. You know, when I went to seminary, they used to say, and they probably still say it, but you're not here to change us, we're here to change you. I think it was a little bit of a threat, actually. But you had all sorts of young seminarians coming across from the country, all experts, of course, in their local parish tradition, coming to tell everybody at the monastery and at the cemetery, yes, that's, say, correct Freudian slip there. At the seminary, what they were doing properly or improperly, and their point was that we're here to form you into priests and the clergy. You're not here to form us. Well, this similar attitude comes for us who have come to the church, some of us who are raised in it, of course, but also those of us who have come in our older years have converted, that we ultimately come to this vast tradition with all of these different facets it has, with the hope that it would form us, that it would transform us, that it would transform us to primarily have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Of course, we should never get distracted with all the facets. We must remember that the crown is placed on the head of the king, and it is the king we worship, but it is the crown that protects it. In the analogy, it is the doctrines, dogmas, it is the things of the church that preserve this way. And they're there to form us. They're there to form us into heavenly people, to be part of our transformation. And that's something we should avail ourselves to. This is why we encourage people to bring iconography home and to adopt the prayers of the church, to come and worship. And maybe it's not natural for you to stand for 3 hours during our worship, but it's part of our tradition. Maybe it's not normal for you to bow and cross yourself all the time, or to say the prayers that other saints have written, or to go to the same service every week with, slight variations. And yet, these are the things that the church has passed to us to form our souls, so that we're not temporal people who are carried about by the new fads of our time, or people who are simply trying to be titillated by new ideas or new theologies, but people that become rooted and grounded within something that is grounded in eternity. I mean, that's the goal. That's one of the goals, besides having a vibrant relationship with Jesus Christ. All of the goals of the church are that relationship and then the formation, our formation within Christ, to teach us how to be as human beings. And the hope is that as you're formed here, that you'll go out there carrying this formation. That you'll go out there as Orthodox Christians and in society be the leaven that leavens the lump of society, of secular society. Everything we do here, our worship, our practice, our dogmas, our teachings is important. And if we begin to select and choose and take various things away, then gradually we become what we're not. We become something else. We change. And of course, this does not glorify God, and ultimately it doesn't form us. It ends up being, when we do change, oftentimes it's because, we prefer our opinion over the things that have been revealed. So, let's celebrate this feast where the icons were restored. If we are not going to do this service with the anathemas, but if you were lucky enough to be at a monastery, you could hear me read all of the anathemas for all the heresies that have been condemned for all times. Some heresies that continue to pop up even now within our country were condemned since the 2nd century. And every year in certain contexts, they'll read these out loud and everybody can reply anathema. Frankly, if I read them out loud in a parish setting, I think most of you would get really bored and say, what is that? What is that? What is Sabellianism or Eunomianism? What is that? I just don't know. Anyways, so may we, to finish this up, may God help us to preserve what has been revealed to us. May He help us to be people who preserve the crown, who protect it, and who want to worship the King of all so that we're transformed by Him, and not people who select and choose and want everything to change for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst.
He is in our shadow.